thanks for joining me for this review to Pokemon Legends ZA. Let's begin. So overall, I'm going to say that this game was fairly good. It was enjoyable mainly because every Pokemon game has that addictive nature of being able to explore and capture Pokemon and level them up. With that said, I'm going to go into a number of the things that I did not like about the game. I'm just starting off with that to say that these criticisms are just constructive. I'm not trying to on the game. So let's begin. So when the battle zones appear, if you're in the middle of a Pokemon battle trying to catch an alpha, as soon as the night cycle hits, you'll lose the chance to fight that alpha and catch it because the whole battle will reload, and you could go from trying to capture an alpha to trying to capture a normal version of that Pokemon. So this is very annoying and has angered me numerous times when I've been trying to capture an alpha. Next is climbing around the town or city up on the rooftops. It's not too bad. It is enjoyable initially, and as you try to explore and capture more Pokemon, it's not too bad. But eventually it does get quite annoying going up and down, trying to find ways to leap from one building to another to time that roto jump just right. And also just trying to find which building you can go up to nearby, and then trying to traverse several others in order to get to that one that you wanted to get to, only to realize that you can't jump far enough to get to it. That was extremely annoying. Going back to the battle zone mechanics, the duels and the cards, the cards help you get more points, trying to get you to do different things like sneak up on opponents or defeat opponents using certain types of abilities. But overall, the game was just a little bit more of a grind than having enjoyable Pokemon battles. Like, for instance, a lot of times it wants you to sneak up on them, but you just want to end up running in head on. The new function of having cooldowns for your powers is not finely tuned at all. In fact, it's more annoying than anything else because your more powerful abilities will take 10-12 seconds to recharge while you're being hit multiple times by a Pokemon that's 20 levels below you, but because its abilities recharge fast, it's able to get multiple hits in. It ends up ruining the idea of freeform battling. When you're on rooftops and you're fighting on a narrow rooftop especially, the ability to battle can fail in numerous ways, but the main way is when your Pokemon falls off of that rooftop. So now you're being attacked by the Pokemon you're trying to battle with, even if it's a Pokemon that came from a trainer. You're getting hurt and your Pokemon fell to the bottom of the building. So now it's like you're just standing there taking damage. I think that ZA's biggest problem lies in too much exposition. It ends up dragging on so long that it just becomes more annoying, and a lot of the exposition parts, especially the strategy meetings, are not just boring, they're painful to sit through. Many of the characters are more two-dimensional, and most of them have no real engaging abilities. Like, I don't want to be more invested in their storylines or the type of characters that they are. They're very boring characters. I don't care about them. I just want to get into battles. The wild zones are definitely an interesting addition to the game, making it more unique, but the failure to include a wild zone around the entire outside of the city weakens the game very much, and it feels like a huge loss in potential. In Pokemon Sword and Shield, there's a huge wild area as a sort of main hub kind of thing. This should have been utilized in Pokemon Legends ZA, possibly having a Majora's Mask Termina Field kind of feel or uniqueness. They could have even created elemental based areas throughout that giant surrounding area. For attempting to be a free roaming game, there's quite a bit of limitation in your ability to explore. The mechanic of climbing up rooftops and moving from rooftops to rooftop, as I've said before, it is an interesting concept, but in execution it fails on numerous ways, especially when you have to wait until certain times of progression in the game until you can unlock those rooftop areas. Another huge problem is the limitation in ground exploration. By this I mean that you can be walking towards a small elevated kind of box scenario where flowers would grow or something like that, and you can't just step on top of it. The game completely blocks you from being able to do that. You instead have to climb up somewhere high and try to roto drop right in that specific spot. Why this is the case, I don't know. It's just retarded. Another major fail of the game involves its starter Pokemon. My choice was Tepig, so I can't speak on the other two starters, but this was a horrible starter Pokemon. When I played Legends Arceus, I chose Cyndaquil, and its final form was both Fire and Ghost type. This was a Fire type Pokemon, it remained a Fire type Pokemon. It didn't gain a second nature. I don't know about the other two, like I said, I didn't play as them, but what I did end up doing was I traded early on with somebody who had a Charizard. As soon as I got that Charizard in my hand, I quit using Tepig and went straight into leveling up my Charizard to 100. It was a much better Pokemon to use. I did enjoy the uniqueness of the roster of Pokemon in this. Legends Arceus kind of stuck to the Diamond and Pearl generation of Pokemon, which wasn't too bad, but I felt that there wasn't as much variety that I would have liked, especially when it came to the earlier generation Pokemon. I prefer to be able to have access to the original 3 starters, Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, in every possible game that I can. They'll always have a special place in my heart, which is why I feel that way. I did enjoy the new Link trade system, where I didn't necessarily need to know somebody to be able to trade with. You had individual distinct trade codes that would allow you to be in a room where it's like, okay, let's say I want to get a Scizor. I could put in a code, it would go straight to an area where other people were trying to trade for Scizors, and you just instantly get it that way. The only downside to this was if you had like, let's go with Scizor. If you had a Scyther that you had been leveling up and was pretty strong, you couldn't trade it and then expect the person to give it back to you. They would keep it. So you had to find somebody you knew who would go back and forth like that. This is why I never finished evolving my Scyther into a Scizor. Like I said, overall the story felt kind of forced. Most Pokemon games are very basic in their mechanics, so there's really no need for an extravagant story. However, when they force a large amount of story exposition into the game, it can be quite annoying and jarring and take away your enjoyment in the gameplay, which is just, catch them all, battle, level them up. This doesn't need to be more extravagant than this. Arceus did have a fairly good storyline, but there have been many Pokemon games where you just feel like you just want the characters to stop talking, you know what you gotta do, you played one, you played them all. Okay, I don't need to have a storyline that's gonna last an hour at the beginning of the game before I can start playing. For the most part, I think that many of the NPCs were boring and annoying, and while the writers were trying to make them individually interesting, the different characteristics for each one were equally as annoying as the others. One of the biggest faults of this game, of course, is the fact that it left out some of the most amazing mechanics that we all came to know and love from Arceus. Primarily, the fact that you were able to get several Pokemon who would help you with exploration in different ways. You had, I can't remember the names of the Pokemon offhand, but you had, like a stag that you can run around faster in. You had, I want to almost say it was Gyarados, but I don't think it was, that you could swim around on. You had the, I think it was like an eagle Pokemon that you could use to fly. I think it was like a Weevil or something that you could use to climb mountains. And there's a 5th one, I just can't remember what it was offhand, but these were very, added to the gameplay, were a new unique way of being able to interact with the environment, and it gave you the ability to essentially not just be using their abilities for battling, but actually be able to use their abilities in practical, real-world exploration and situations and solving puzzles. The fact that that's sorely lacking from this game takes so much away from it. The wild zones themselves were interesting, but they also felt confining and small. Like I said, it would have been great to have a big wild area surrounding the town, which could have been put there at the end of the game and unlocked, greater exploration. Something at the end of the game like that would have pulled you into wanting to play even more, especially if they put new Pokemon in that you could not get any other way. The Screw side quest was also very annoying, though it did give some nice benefits. Like I said, going back to the Charizard, it would have been great to be able to hop on top of Charizard and fly up to the top of buildings, or have a Pokemon that would, like Weevil did, climb up the buildings for you, carrying you up. But this, like I said, these mechanics were completely left out of this game. They wanted to pad out the game with this exploration on rooftops, so it made the city feel smaller and more confined overall, rather than feeling like a great open exploration kind of game. The greatest fail of this game, though, is confiding itself to the same old tried and true mechanics of all Pokemon games, which is basically what I've already said. It's confining. It basically is forcing you to go in a very narrow direction. It's like, okay, this is what you're doing next. There really isn't too much you get to do outside of it. Exploring the wild zones as they opened up more and more was indeed interesting, but once you open them all up, they're just like, okay, now what? But, Game Freak has come to see that these games are very successful with the mechanics and formula that they've been using, so why would they change anything? The biggest flaw in all Pokemon games, especially now, is the potential for these games is so great, yet completely missed. Or, how should I say, it's like, this game has so much potential, but they're just like, screw it, things are working the same, status quo. But it's like, you have newer games coming out, like Pal World, which has been out for a while, so I don't want to call it newer, but it's like, a new generation of, let's take a game that's very similar to Pokemon, almost like illegally so, or illegally, I don't know the status on that, but it gives you more exploration, it gives you more kind of like openness to different things that you can do instead of having it be so one directional, confining. You played one Pokemon game, you played them all. It's just, there was so much potential in this game and it was just not there, which I think is the biggest reason why everybody had the harshest criticism towards this game, was simply because of that reason. Like I said, the storyline kind of felt bloated, and I think the primary reason why that was because it was trying to make this city feel bigger than it actually was. There wasn't so much padding out of side quests, storyline, bloating out storylines where it's like, okay, we've gone through this enough, it's been mission accomplished for quite a while before it's finally like, okay, well, we'll let you go do whatever you want now. Meanwhile, you keep on having these messages from your teammates telling you like, oh hey, come on back, we gotta move on to the next objective, and it's like, you want me to explore, but you're telling me to come back now. One of the things I did like was the number of TMs that there were, but there were other things that it was like, why are there so many of them? Like all the different types of Pokeballs there were. I only really stuck to the basics. In Arceus, they had a more understandable amount of Pokeballs and what they were used for. Like you had your standard 3, then you had your heavier Pokemon balls like the Iron Ball, the Lead Ball, and like I think the other one was like Gigaton Ball or something like that. And then you had your the flight balls that if there was a Pokemon that was flying or was really far off, you could end up throwing these from a large distance and they would connect and capture the Pokemon. There were also a lot of different berries that I never used. There were a lot of different items that were never really made to be integral to the gameplay, so it's just like, you just cast them aside as if, why do I even need these? The grinding of the Mega Evolution Shards was tedious in and of itself. Having to grind more and more of them was just painful, and it was almost in a way kind of unnecessary to the gameplay. I mean, there was definitely the reason for having them, but the reason why I say it was unnecessary was because things could have been made a lot simpler than just roaming around town breaking rocks. It could have been more interesting of a way to achieve the same goal instead of just going around breaking rocks or crystals or whatever the hell you want to call them. As I've said, the cooldown battle mechanic was a huge disaster for this game. You could be waiting 10 to 12 seconds for the recharge for your ability, and it'd be a powerful ability and you're a powerful Pokemon at that time, but some Pokemon that's weaker but it's using faster moves can stack damage on you, and it's just insane and it's annoying, and those attacks can hit you and you can't control where your Pokemon's going to stand, so it could almost like walk into an attack rather than evade it. I miss the old PP system instead of having this cooldown recharge system. I haven't played the Mega Dimension DLC, so I can't really speak on that. This is pretty much just the main game. And speaking of Mega Evolutions, they weren't as great as I was expecting them to be. Obviously you had the huge Mega Evolution like boss battles, but once I got Mega Evolution abilities, they weren't as OP as I was hoping for. they still kind of kept the battles, even. And I was hoping to, once I had Mega Evolution, to just pretty much any Pokemon that was around me at that point was just completely helpless. I didn't feel that as much in this game. And some of the Mega Evolutions just suck, especially for Tepig, his final form, or his final evolution. It was just overall a terrible Pokemon, in my opinion. The primary two that I kept with was Charizard and Mewtwo, and then, what's his name, Lucario. But, like I said, these are all constructive criticisms. My primary concern with these criticisms is to just show how much greater of a game this could have been, and it just failed to reach that level of expectation. This game had been worked on for a long time, it was hyped up, and it really should have been much greater than it was. I'm hoping that the next Legends game is more open world, more free, larger. Even if there's a hub area like was in Legends Arceus, that's understandable, and I have no problem with it. But like larger areas to explore is preferable, and I hope that they use some new, interesting Pokemon. I'm not sure which ones were new in this game, or all the ones that were new, so there may have been some new ones, or just a hodgepodge of different generation Pokemon. I'm not sure. You'll have to mention that in the comments for me to let me know which ones there were. So like I said, with that all said, overall 7 to 8 out of 10 because of all Pokemon games having that addictive, catch 'em all, level 'em up, battle game style. I'm hoping that in the future, Game Freak decides to take a step out of their comfort zone and make something much more amazing than this game was. With that said, I just want to say thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed my video. Put down any comments of what you thought of the game if you played it as well. If you agree with me, if you think I'm an asshole for the things that I said about the game, let me know. With that said, thanks for watching.